Strategy is a philosophy of becoming. It is your way of thinking about who you seek to serve and the change you seek to make. Strategy is a compass, not a map. When the world changes, your strategy might not. The map certainly will. Your tactics will. But a strategy is the thing you get to lean against that is your North Star, where you're headed.
Welcome back, everybody. This is the Greg McKeown Podcast, and I'm here with Seth Godin, who has been a part of the world, the genre of business books, of course, going back originally, particularly known for his marketing prowess. But he's been writing for so long now, 20 books, I'm sure the number is not precise, that he is a part of the modern world of management, like a Peter Drucker was in his time. Seth is a part of the world of thinking in that sense. Infinite number of people get his daily blog, and he has just written a book called This is Strategy, which I'm going to put to him in a moment, is about strategy, but seems to be almost as much about systems as it is about strategy, particularly the idea, I think he is trying to inspire the reader to be able to navigate complex systems in order to be able to take high leverage strategic action that gets the kind of future that you want. That's my sense of this new book, and of course it covers many different subjects, as all of Seth's books do. And with that as an introduction, Seth, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Greg. I am honored. Some of my close friends have been lucky enough to be on the show with you, so thank you for having me.
What did I get wrong?
Oh, I don't think you got anything wrong. Words are tricky because words can open doors for us, but they can also trap us. So people think they have a strategy, but what they actually have is a bunch of tactics or a job or a dream. But a strategy is a very special thing, and there are almost no books about it, and we never talk about it except in certain rarefied places. And what I wanted to do was open the door for people to have the conversation, to see what a strategy actually is, and to find an elegant one that helps them make the change they seek to make.
So let's get to some definitions. In your words, simplest words, for a 12-year-old, what is strategy?
Strategy is a philosophy of becoming. It is your way of thinking about who you seek to serve and the change you seek to make. Strategy is a compass. It's not a map. When the world changes, your strategy might not. The map certainly will. Your tactics will. But a strategy is the thing you get to lean against that is your North Star, where you're headed.
One of the entries in your book outlines 12 questions that one can ask to be able to get your head into the kinds of questions, the kind of clarity that you need to try and draw upon to have a strategy. Do you want to talk about any of those specific questions that stand out to you, or the whole process?
Well, there are 500 questions in the book, and a lot of them are rhetorical. What we need to understand is, as you said, systems, hidden systems, invisible systems, systems filled with gravity, change everything in our life, and we don't see them. But to start a project that goes against a powerful system is certainly a route to failure. So what we need to see is, what are the powerful systems? Systems that can range from the wedding industrial complex or the college industrial complex to Moore's Law to marketplace economics. These are all things that cause us to think that they are normal, because systems invent culture to defend themselves. Systems don't like to change. And we are part of a system, but if we use the system, we can change the system.
How would you just define that term systems.
So let me use my favorite example so people can conceptualize it. The solar system is a famous system. And there's Earth and there's Sun and there's planets. The Earth doesn't go around the Sun because it wants to. It goes around the Sun because of gravity. Anytime human beings come together to do productive work, we create a system. So it used to be, until 120 years ago, if you bought a nut or a bolt, there was no matching one you could buy to go with it. The whole idea that there were sizes for nuts and bolts is new. The system, the imperial system, the metric system, was invented to create interoperability. So if you show up in Japan and drive on the wrong side of the road, you are challenging the system and you're going to die, right? It's really good that everyone in Japan decided to drive on the correct side of the road, because if they didn't, people wouldn't be able to get around. And so what we're looking for is, oh, what's the genre of the people in Silicon Valley? Oh, what does the admissions office at Harvard look for? Oh, what are the things that are likely to work at a trade show or not? These are all systems choices. And when we don't like what a system makes, we need to think hard about why it's making it and how it can be influenced to stop making it.
It seems to me sometimes that there are like almost two kinds of people in the world. There are people who are reacting to the noise, and they're very stuck in their heads, and the system is invisible to them. And then there's this other group that have what we might call an observer's advantage, where they were introduced, almost always they had to be introduced to the idea by someone, there's a system. And that system is shaping you, your thoughts at a subconscious level, all that internal system, and then all of these systems outside of yourself. And I just love all of the examples that you've shared. But there seems to be a chasm difference between living in the first way versus the second. Just to even consider that.
Well, there's a third one.
Yeah, go ahead.
If I could
Please.
interrupt.
Of course you should.
Because this is brilliant what you just said. But the third one is where the fertile territory is. The third one is for people who are intuitive, who are successful despite their lack of conscious understanding. So I interviewed for a major company. I did a bunch of broadcast interviews, and one of them was for a famous person in the fashion industry. And I was nervous because I didn't know a lot about the fashion industry. So I read this person's 2 autobiographies, and I started asking them questions about how they were making decisions. And I realized a few minutes into it, not only hadn't they written their autobiographies, they hadn't read their autobiographies.
Right.
And so there are all these people, Silicon Valley, fashion, music, who just made it work, but they can't tell you how. And there are other people who can see the system, and they make much better deliberate decisions because they can say, when you present this system with this sort of offer, it's going to grab it.
I really love that. The idea of there being this third group that has the unconscious competence to be able to read not just the room, but it includes that, read the room, read the market, read product design, what will work, what won't. Actually, I have a daughter who's highly skilled at this and has been from very, very young in her life. I remember taking to a birthday party, and she was expecting it to be one way, and we got there, and it was like a factory, like a huge business where we were going, and she'd sort of imagined someone's backyard, and she's just like 5 years old, and she was really scared, and she came and she hugged me and was quite sad because this was so different than her expectation. And I didn't do anything, but she just watched, and she just, and I learned so much watching her watch. And after about, 5 minutes, she went from being really kind of sad about the situation to going, got it. I see the rules.
Yeah.
I see the system. I know how to play this game and to win it. And she ran off and she was absolutely happy and successful. But I've seen her do that everywhere she goes, everyone she meets. She and I would agree that it's in the intuitive category, but she is looking for the system, even if she wouldn't use those words. Did that spark anything more for you?
Yeah, it did. Let me give you two stories, maybe three, from big companies and small ones. The first one happened about 30 or 40 years ago. Barry Bronfman saw that the CAT scan and the MRI were breakthrough technologies that hospitals probably would benefit from. Patients who had access to these devices would come out ahead. The traditional way to approach it, the intuitive way, would say, hospitals need this, I can sell it, I'll go make sales calls. And what Barry figured out was, oh, GE is part of a system that needs to lease things. They have a leasing division. And hospitals are part of a system that can't pay for things up front. So what he did was he went to GE and got a big leasing budget. And then he went to hospitals and said, you want a CAT scan for free? You just have to pay for it every single time you give someone a treatment. And connecting those two systems to each other enabled him to wire thousands of hospitals with these expensive, important scanners. One from much older is the potato. So potatoes come from Peru, and people in South America have been eating them for thousands of years, but colonialists from Europe only brought them back in about 1600. But there's a problem, which is the potato was a low status food because it came from some place that wasn't Western Europe. And it was new. And food and new don't really go together, certainly in the old days. So they were almost banned in England. And in France, they were banned. And a guy, an entrepreneur, wanted to bring potatoes to France. So he did two really fascinating things. The first thing he did was he somehow cajoled Marie Antoinette to put potato flowers in her hair to sort of normalize that this new food might be okay. But the second thing he did was he rented some farmland a few miles from Versailles. He planted potatoes, and then he surrounded the field with armed guards. And at night, he didn't send in a night shift of guards, so the plot was unguarded. Well, the story, it must be important and high status because there are guards. At night, people came and stole the potatoes. And they discovered when they ate the potatoes, they were fine, and so it began to spread. These are both examples of how you can change the world without changing what the system wants. Because the system wants what it wants, but if you give it a way to get what it wants, it's more likely to help you.
Well, one of the things I love about not just those stories, but your description at the end is the treatment of the system as a third player, like thinking of the system in a personified way. One of the ways I've thought about this in my own life is that in every relationship there are three people, right? So there's you, there's them, and the system. And how easy it is, even after, I don't know, I feel like I've been thinking about systems for 20 plus years in a reasonably serious way, and yet how easy it is to be blind to it in the next altercation or the next conflict or the next conversation or the next, to just underplay the system's role. And so the person that you're speaking to, they're being so unhelpful. And then you remember, no, the system, they're in a system. If I were in that system, I would likely behave in a very similar way because the system is what it is. And so I just love the idea of imagining the system as an additional person, ever present, ever having an impact.
Yes, that's a great way to think about it. Yes.
How do you think the best way is for somebody new to systems thinking to get rapidly up to speed with it? I mean, is that what this is strategy. The book has lots of stories and questions and you know, just to bolster my position at the beginning of this conversation, that this book, while about strategy, may be even more about systems. I don't know that we have to make that point, but it's I thought it was an interesting one. That if you add up all of the titles, like, every entry has each of the entries has a title in the book, and there's many of those. And if you add up how many say strategy and how many say systems wins, that's my tiny data point to support my case. Yes. So is that the answer? Read the book? Or how would you think about helping somebody new to systems thinking to make the invisible systems visible?
So I'm not in the book selling business. So if someone doesn't read the book, that's fine, as long as they talk about it. What is my method? My method begins with every system has nodes in it, individuals or planets. Those nodes care about things. Few of them are evil. They care mostly about status and affiliation. Status is who eats lunch first, who's got more power, who's moving up. Affiliation is, am I in sync? Who's to my left? Who's to my right? How do I stay in sync? So I start with these nodes. What messages are they getting? So if I'm talking to a bureaucrat at the rental car counter, that person's thinking about their status as their career, their affiliation with their boss and their job, and they're not interested in my problem, right? That's not in their top 5 things. Then the second thing is the system itself exists because it produces something that many of the nodes in the system value. So I need to look for what that is. And then the third thing is there's often an outside force, a change agent, could be technology, that is buffeting a system. So Kevin Kelly's brilliant book, What Technology Wants, completely opened my eyes, because he imagines that technology is a species evolving, and that the iPhone has evolved beautifully, Darwinian style, to take over the lives of many, many people. When you realize these things are happening, you can see the forces on the nodes. So, and here's another example, again, based on history. It's in Malcolm Gladwell's new book. Harvard University, about 50% of the people who get in because of sports. And they field teams that are fairly unusual, like fencing or women's rugby. And if you are the women's rugby coach, you have a problem, which is your status and affiliation is based on finding high school students who are good enough to be recruited. So if you're a high school student and you want to get into Harvard, that's a great path to do so. But if I sat down with the rugby coach and said, do you know why Harvard lets half of the students in because of a sports bonus? They probably would not say because of anti-Asian and anti-Jewish sentiment in the 1920s. But that is exactly why they do it, because it was a way to keep Harvard looking like what they thought Harvard was supposed to look like without saying that's what they were doing. And so you see these forces 100 years later still arranged in a certain way because that's what the system wants.
Is this the new book, Revenge? Is that what you're talking about?
Revenge of the Tipping Point, yes. That's a very clever title. What you described in terms of the solar system, the nodes, you identified what universally you think people operate by. And then additionally, you said, and then beyond that, what other incentives might they specifically have that would have helped to create the system that we have right now? I mean, you're describing a thought process, a method that's universally applicable, right? Of course, a CEO could think like that, a president could think like that, an executive could think like that, but every person can think this way in every interaction. Every time they're communicating. Well, here's another question. So that's a method for external systems. So just humor me for a moment about the individual.
right? Like a person
Right.
not communicating with somebody else, but they just say, oh, there's a new goal I want to set. I want to run a marathon. And talk about the systems, because, loosely speaking, I think there's two systems: external, everything is external, all that complexity, then the internal universe, which is also, kind of an infinite solar system itself. Your thoughts?
Okay, so I would like to take one intermediate step on our way there.
Love
The
it.
intermediate step is, because you mentioned the president and the CEO, I want to talk about the receptionist. The receptionist at Kodak, before they went bankrupt, Kodak was a Fortune 100 company. If you went to Rochester before the internet, you would walk into the main entrance and the receptionist would greet you. She would know your name. She would have you sit down and she would chat with you for a minute or two, dishing some local gossip, learning something about you, and then sending you to the right part of the institution. I only met her 5 or 6 times, and I considered her someone who made me feel good when I was in her presence. This woman's job was the most secure job in the entire city of Rochester, New York. And her day was better because she understood that in her role as gatekeeper in that moment, she had people's status and affiliation in the palm of her hand. And if she could prime them to have a better meeting when they got upstairs, she was adding an enormous amount of value. That's a strategy, right? Okay, so now we're going to shift to, what if there aren't 2 people? What if there's only 1 person?
But stay, I
Even
want
if
you to do that. I want you to
Yeah.
do that, but I still want to stay on that lovely story about the receptionist, because it feels like we need a sort of a name for somebody like that. I mean, I'm thinking trim tab, which I know you reference in the book, but it's one of my favorite metaphors. From Buckminster, and this idea that there's a single person there. Like, they seem so symbolically a trim tab to me, this story, right? A person who could easily think of their role as being unimportant. I've gone into many organizations in which, really they have not understood that they have any power at all, other than just giving you the security badge or not. So I love the idea that this person, if they understood the system they were a part of, they are affecting the quality of the whole organization. They're affecting the effectiveness. Whatever the percentage is, I don't know, but it's greater than 0 of the meeting and the conversation and the decisions that are about to take place. That's a great story of empowerment within the empowerment that follows understanding a system.
Yes. My book, Linchpin, which is about
Yes.
15 years old, Linchpin is about that choice. People
Yes.
who didn't read it misunderstood it as, here's how a way that any individual can make themselves indispensable. That's not what it says. What it says is, you can live a life acting as if people would miss you if you are gone. And if you can bring energy and generosity to that work, you will have an unlimited advantage for decades. And even organizations that automate, even organizations that bring in AI, they still need linchpins. People who are going to show up and do more than is in the job description because they see the strategy.
There have been many times I've met assistants in my life, and I've shared this with them. Maybe it's a little self-serving because I don't know. But what I say is, there's sort of 2 kinds of people in the world. There are kings and then there are kingmakers. And I see their role as being a kingmaker, and it's a little self-serving because it's, a little bit of a line, I suppose. But I've had people tear up in reaction to that framing of their work, because they can feel so invisible. People are just trying to get to the boss behind the desk, to the big name, the influencer. And it's like, I tell you, I sometimes think it's as valuable to be connected with the assistant as the name. Honestly, on all sorts of things. I mean, this is true, but I really believe that they're the ones that actually make, not just give you access to them, they're the ones often that make the thing happen. decide whether it happens. They're enormously influential. That seems consistent. Okay, but then this was just a bridge to the question that I'd asked before. The individual. See the system within your own, what appears to be a one-person goal.
So there are branches of psychotherapy about family systems. Family systems are real. The gravity is real. And because most people only have one family growing up, it's easy to imagine this is normal. And what happens when we seek self-improvement is those people are still in the room, even if they're not. And the second piece of it is high school. High school is a travesty, and high school is something many people continue to live for the rest of their life. So when we add up family systems and high school systems, and they are present, reminding you of your position in the solar system, most of what we need to do to self-actuate and get to the next level is to forgive those people because they were playing their role in a system that's bigger than them. Realize that if we don't forgive them, they're going to be keeping us where we are, even when they're not even aware. They might be dead, right? And we're not doing this so the high school reunion will go well. We're doing this work.
So your life goes well.
Because we made it. Yeah, we made it through high school. Now what, right? And it's this idea that you might be a victim, but telling yourself you are a victim and acting like you are a victim almost certainly will not make tomorrow better. And if we can see that, we can come up with a strategy for ourselves. Oh, the reason I need to stop and have a chocolate bar every single day is habit, is because I'm trying to make up for something, blah, blah, blah. So I can, as Charles Duhigg and others would point out, move the chocolate bars to another part of the house. And that one shift, a tactic, will unfold a new strategy for me that could transform my health, right? So there's all these stories we tell ourselves that we often tell ourselves without empathy, that aren't based on reality, that involve taking ourselves too seriously, all of which I'm talking about with strategy. But yes, we can reflect it right back into ourselves.
I love the family systems. There are, of course, therapists that specialize in this, where they'll literally bring, so if one person's going through therapy, they may insist on the whole family being there. Some design it that way, and of course it limits who can go through the process because you can't always get a whole family to come in. But whether they have the whole family or not, the idea is to visualize or to put people in the physical placement that you would imagine them to be in. And so, which at first glance seems such an odd idea because, of course, nobody has a physical place. You were all just family, and you moved in every possible physical orientation. But what the creators of this found were that you do have a mental map in your head of the position of the people, how big they are, where they stand, who's in front of who, and that this is acting on you all the time, especially, of course, with your family, but of course it's acting in other ways too, that you're trying, maybe the other people were really big and you were small and you couldn't get it, and so now you have to spend your whole life trying to be bigger to make up for that, and of course any endless numbers of these. You're saying even where any time a person is trying to do anything, there will be invisible systems playing an enormous role. And them being invisible, of course, is its greatest power, because then you just, you can deny it or just not know about it, and then you'll be pummeled into a corner. I mean, imagine if you're boxing and you think there's no opponent, well, then you are over. You are going to be destroyed by it. Now that's a very, the high school family systems, that's a very particular kind of therapeutic process a person might go through. Are there practical things a person could do without that in order to make sense of the system that they came from, in your mind? What's your favorite tip for what you can do?
The narrative I'm talking about is I think psychotherapy can be a great benefit, but I'm talking about something simpler than that. I'm talking about an acknowledgement. So Something really extraordinary happened to me about 15 years ago. So I was probably 50 years old. I had accomplished a bunch of things. I'm walking down Columbus Avenue in New York City in the 70s, and I'm passing a playground. And the playground's on the other side of this fence, and I hear a kid taunting someone. He's probably 6, and he's calling this person names. And then I realize he's taunting me. He's calling me Baldy and stuff like this. And it didn't hurt my feelings. And it would have crushed me, many years earlier, but I had outgrown the ability to be crushed by a 6-year-old's taunts. And good for me, but it took a very long time to do that. So when we think about, someone's here and they just said any questions, and there's only 10 people in the room, so any of us can ask a question, but I never ask a question, the person says to themselves. Or podcasting is invented. Some people, like Greg, go ahead and start a podcast that becomes one of the most important podcasts in the world, but other people tell themselves the story of, I'm not good enough, alert enough, surplus enough to go do that. And so these stories that we engage are well grooved, and they become part of our system, the internal one. And if it's getting you what you want,
yeah, I like that.
Yeah, if it's getting you what you want, please keep doing it. But if it's not getting you what you want, I think what Donella Meadows would say, what Russ Akoff would say, maybe even Fuller, they would say, can you name it? Can you just describe the system that has made you decide you never ask a question, that has made you decide you never say thank you, that has made you decide you never let someone ahead of you in traffic, that has made you decide you always let someone ahead of you in traffic? There's a system that got built that made you do that. And again, if it's not helping you, you should name it, and then you can do something with it.
Yeah, it's see it, name it. Then I mean, naming is so disproportionately important and powerful because it takes it from behind the curtain and gives it tangibility, and then it formulates an object in our mind, right? It becomes its own node, let's say, and you can. Yeah. And then you can manipulate it. You can look around it. You can turn it around. Let's have a look, like a Tony Stark 3D, frame of okay. Let's zoom in. Let's enlarge it. Let's look at what's going on.
Right. And so for me, when I turned 20, the flip was this. I used to say fairly often, here we go again. And I flipped it to, that's happening again. What should I do? And that's a fundamentally different form of action taking. Right? The first one was just sighing in awareness, but realizing it was going to be bad again. And the second one was, it's raining outside. Now what am I going to do? Not, it's raining outside. The day's over. Right? It was an opportunity to do something with the data.
So it was the bit flipped for you was you still observed in both cases, but in the second, so what is it? You shift from being an observer to acting. I'm now not just noticing. I'm far enough away from it. I can act on the stimulus. Is that the difference?
Well,
like
so the specific that kicked in a couple years later, I have made a lot of sales calls. I was one of the pioneers of the internet, so I was up and down Madison Avenue selling stuff. And the idea in the first model is this person's about to reject me. This person's going to reject me. They don't really want what I have. And then when they reject you, go, yep, there it is again. Mm-hmm. And the second model is often people say they don't want something, but if I'm smart, I can hear what they said, hear what's behind it, and see if I can help them in a different way. So the first one was resignation. The second one was opportunity.
I like that framing, but the way you described it makes me think it's something else. Not that wasn't the effect, but the process, the phrase you used that means so much to me. Like it's like an acorn wood with a like a world inside of it. Is this idea there was something behind it? I think that idea that, I mean, I'm trying to find so many ways to express this. I'm doing research on it right now, but the idea that there are infinitesimally small but infinitely important truths, although I'm not sure that's the word I want, but they're hidden below the surface.
Yes.
Many, many layers below the surface. Same for me. We've been talking about how an individual wants to achieve a goal and so on. Same for a relationship. Same for the people I'm talking to. And that's what one of the things that makes it worth the effort to be curious is because if you're curious, you can find, it's not a term I normally use, but it is the language of systems thinking. You can find the leverage point that will actually disproportionately help you achieve the thing you want to achieve. But you're not going to see it on the surface. No one's going to tell you what it is. And the reason they're not going to tell you is because they don't know. And even if they really did, they might be very vulnerable to share it for whatever reason. So they're going to say stuff that isn't what they mean. And just that idea that every interaction with yourself or with another person, with a team, with an organization, that you are entering the most fascinating system. And the deeper you go, the more valuable, the more interesting, the more game-changing it will be. I think that's the thing that changes everything. When people don't listen to each other, which of course is universal now, seems universal to me anyway. They say, "Oh, you should be a better listener." They say, "Oh, so really, if they're honest, they're so boring," and they're not wrong because they're just used to listening at the surface where it's safe and boring. But behind, that's the mystery. So I think curious people, it's not that they're necessarily more inherently curious. It's like curious people just understood somehow that the system gets more interesting behind the surface, under the surface, behind. That to me seemed to be the thing that you actually changed about. There's more to the story here, and I'm interested in that.
Exactly. Yes.
But in that, I'm going to make a story up, and you're going to tell me, maybe it's an obvious story and it's an easy yes, or I'm going to get it wrong, but it seems to me that in that little microcosm phrase, there's something behind this, something underneath this. That's the rest of your life. Like that's you now. Now, I don't mean that it was all zero and then all, but it seems to me that it's that thought that then means, well, of course I want to write. Of course I'm going to put ideas down. Of course I'm going to try and express them. Of course I'm going to, when I'm meeting with clients, I'm going to try and understand what's over there because it's so rich and interesting and there's a whole universe to value that other people aren't even seeing. They can't even see it, and this is your whole life. Am I wrong? Did I get it wrong?
I don't think you got it wrong. I think that empathy sometimes gets put into a ghetto called kindness, and I'm in favor of kindness. But empathy is also a really practical tool because other people have agency. Other people have the ability to say yes or no. And if we can just try to imagine what it is to be the node that they are, try to imagine what their internal system is like or what their deep goals are, we can serve them without manipulating them. And this empathy
really good.
Is usually created to cause tension, not to relieve it. So we want a friend to relieve tension. But if we want to make a change happen, we have to cause tension. So, a trivial surface example. In the old days, when they were at their peak, CAA, the very fancy talent agency in Los Angeles and Beverly Hills. Yeah. If you went there for a meeting, I'm talking about receptionists today, I'm not sure why. If you went there for a meeting, the entire first floor was empty, except for one extremely attractive person sitting all the way across the room. And so, just like the Wizard of Oz, you had to walk this long, very, very expensive hallway to be admitted. This was a service they offered. And the service was, you didn't come here for a hug. You came here to be admitted to a high-status place that you didn't think you could get into. You came here because you want to play at a different level, and we're going to act that out for you. Right? And the same thing is true. You know, everyone who buys clothes is already wearing clothes. So we buy them because we want to. Everyone who goes to a restaurant already has food at home. We're eating for a different reason than getting the food. So if it's hard to get a reservation, that's a service, because they want customers who want to go to a restaurant that's hard to get into. And they can use that to create a show that you're willing to pay for happily and come back to. Whereas if they said, it's just going to be all a big buffet and we're going to lower the price as much as we can, yeah, that's Las Vegas and people will come, but different people for a different reason.
On this subject of what's the word now? We'll edit it. But you said the people in CAA, that person. What's the name of those people?
The receptionist,
not assistant receptionist. That's what it.
The agent. Okay. Yes.
Well, there's the subject of receptionists. In my work in Hollywood, I just find it so interesting that they still use an outdated norm in order to reach the agent. So as you know, typically you don't call the agent, and even if you know the agent really well, even if they're your agent, you will be put through to their assistant, who will immediately put you through to them. There's no other industry that works like that anymore. Like, it's just gone. You just don't have that anymore. I mean, of course, there are assistants involved, but if you have the connection with the person, you call them on their mobile and so on. You don't have this norm, but they have it. And I'm just so curious about it. It just seems like such a pull from the golden age norm. It holds no no efficiency benefit. But of course, it makes a lot of sense if you're still trying to hold on or create a sense of status. Then you're just reminding everybody, hey, there's a gatekeeper every time you want to talk to me. And then it makes sense.
Yes. Until the change agent comes. And the change agent is the wind that blows the system sideways. And so in the book industry, the change agent arrived 25 years ago, and they still think their customer is an independent bookstore. They still think the only real books are on paper. The market is shifting really, really fast, but the system is fighting it at every step. When I was at Yahoo,
the Matrix
Yahoo's
is
strategy
fighting back.
Yeah, it always does. When I was at Yahoo, the strategy was, the internet is nascent. It's held together with matchsticks. We're going to build a site that's really organized. And when people come, we don't want them to leave. We want one click to turn into 100, because we sell ads on every single page. That was the strategy. So there's all these tactics that could support that. Then the wind showed up, and the wind was the independent open web got better. And Google came along with a different strategy. Their strategy was, come to our site and leave. We would like you to leave as fast as possible, because we only make money when you leave. So I was at Yahoo when they had a chance to buy Google for $10 million.
Yeah.
And they said no and invested the money in Yahoo Kids instead.
Yeah.
Because they couldn't bear to see a new strategy and decide if they wanted to embrace it. The same way Western Union turned down the telephone when they could have bought AT&T for nothing. So when we are now living in these times that are changing faster than we can imagine, the change agents are real. We can persist with our old system, or we can say, this is going to change the system. What an opportunity for me to show up and be of use.
There's so many places I want to go, but the Yahoo reference, it always seems to me that those of us that have worked in Silicon Valley in a deep way are just constantly a little bit sad about Yahoo. You know, it's not conscious. It's just in the back. It's just the back of our minds somewhere that there's poor Yahoo over there, you know, that invented the consumer web, and then couldn't solve that success. You know, they couldn't get out of that success trap. And so if you have all of your customers using, well, if every one of your services is only being used by 5% of your customers, what do you do? Like it is a solvable problem, but it's really, really emotionally hard problem to solve. To say, well, we're going to choose this 5% and that's going to become the thing we do. And it just seems like nobody's been able to solve basically the success of Yahoo from the beginning. And Marissa Meyer, we went in with a lot of, energy and did a bunch of stuff, but I just didn't address that problem because I don't know if anyone really can. I don't know. What do you think? What's your thoughts about that with Yahoo?
Well, so the metaphor for personal improvement is important, and then we can go back to Yahoo. If you win an Olympic medal when you're 26, you're never going to have that experience again. So you can continue to try to repeat the experience to diminishing returns, or you can look at the system that is your life and what you're surrounded by and say, what were the things about that I can learn from, and what are the things about that I have to leave behind? So in the case of Yahoo, the day I knew they were doomed was I walked into the sales office and there were 40 people all looking at the stock ticker. But all day, every day, the top 1,000 people were looking at the stock ticker, because if the stock went up $1, some people made $500,000. Right. And that short-term, hamster eating the pills is very hard to undo. And so
the incentive system is so strong.
Kicks in. Yeah, exactly.
Go on.
And so I said to Jerry Yang, because they had bought my company, I wasn't there very long. I said, Jerry, here's what I want to do. I want to take 3 people. I want to cut my salary by 80% and move across the street. We're just going to invent businesses so you don't have to buy them later for $1 billion. And he turned to me and he said, Seth, I'd love for you to do that, but everyone else wants to do that too. And I thought, that's the dumbest reason I've ever heard not to innovate.
Yeah, that's like I was seeing the disappointment, but I get what you're saying. The second level, you're like, everyone wants to innovate, and that's why we can't do it. Like that's not. Right. I get why you maybe don't want me to do it, because there's other people you think would be better at doing it, or that you. Right. But the idea that we're just not going to do it to anyone because everyone wants it. Yeah. That's not a great. It's not a great moment. I mean, there was something you said that hit me at an emotional level that surprised me. And it surprises me because it's not itself a new idea, but it hit me as being real for me, true for me, in a way I hadn't properly acknowledged. And what you were talking about was this, you win the gold medal at the Olympics, you're never going to do that again type of thing, but you're chasing that, you're trying to return to that. And I lecture my children about this, like, don't peak too soon. I'm always saying that. I'm like, who cares? I don't care about the grade you're getting right. It doesn't matter. I can celebrate with you, but that's not the top. High school, you're going to be the top person in high school. Oh, that's the worst. Then you're just going to peak as that. And so on, all through your life you can peak. And so I'm a believer in this, but I suddenly feel in this moment like, yeah, but you're still doing it, Greg. And the way in which I think I'm still doing it, I'm working on this new book, and it's a multi-year project. It already has been, and so it's, like it's a deep thing. But the gravitational pull towards essentialism, so essentialism's done particularly well, is so great, and it's a strange tension, this, because of course you want to bring forward all the things you learned. What's his name? Mission Impossible. Tom Cruise. He has this thing of, like, he wants to take all of the good he's ever learned in the last movie and then create the next one with all the things he's ever learned. And there's nothing wrong with that. And so it's not that one wants to throw away the learning, but the recreation of the past, that is a huge problem. And I can feel that it's still too real for me. And it reminds me of, when Steve Jobs goes back to Apple and there's like a little museum, as so many corporations have them. These are our greatest hits. These are our things. And maybe that's okay to do that, to celebrate your story. But he got rid of all of it. He just took it to Silicon Valley Museum, right? And said, we're not trying to recreate the past. We're trying to invent the future. And ironically, it then creates EMAC, but that is an irony. It's not a contradiction. It's not a bad idea. It was a paradox that he's saying, forget the past. We're going to name something based on the past. But it was all about throw away what we did before. We're not going there. We're not going to the past. We're going to the future. But it takes courage to do this. The word sounds easy, but the courage to do it. Yahoo hasn't had the courage to do it. But it's easy for me to say that. I'm not the one having to have the courage. Yeah, your reaction.
So there's a one of the great jazz songs of all time, recorded live, was the first time they played it, called "Compared to What," from the Montrose Jazz Festival. If you haven't heard it, look it up. Compared to what is such an important expression, because I took a cross country ski lesson from a guy who'd been on the Olympic team, and how could it be that him giving me a lesson felt anything like what he had accomplished in Lake Placid or whatever? And he explained to me that if you boiled it down to the moment, it's not giving permission to other people to make you feel good. It was his feeling of a synapse closing and accomplishing something. So for him, if I could get the joke, if his pedagogy was good enough that I went from being mediocre to flying, he felt exactly the same feeling, even though nobody was cheering him on. That is key. Like, I've had so many lucky breaks and so much privilege. I'm never going to speak in front of that many people again live. Never. But that's okay, because that's not what I'm keeping track of. I'm keeping track of, in a moment, can I have an interaction with a person where I can say, I added some value there. If I can make that feel the same way, then I can do it all day long.
Yeah, you're describing a sort of the aha moment. Something was unlocked because we had a conversation, because we listened to each other, because we got in each other's world. Something that was trapped gets unlocked. And I hadn't necessarily thought about it in terms of a metric, like an actual measurable thing to. You're not quite saying this, but where you could keep a track of that, right? Like, you could actually say, okay, how can I have the next one? How can I interact with somebody, the next conversation, and increase at least the ratio of how many interactions are piecemeal, surface, shallow, versus these, these game-changing moments. But what I really do relate to is satisfaction of that metric.
Yes.
That I had an experience recently where I was picked up at the airport. There's 12 minutes between the airport and the hotel, and I wasn't playing a game in any manipulative sense. I wasn't like, but I did have this feeling. You have 12 minutes to try and have it, not just an interesting conversation, but is there something more, And it was so beautiful what followed, and I don't know if I can capture it all, but I think my first question was, okay, what's the hardest thing in your life right now? And I said it with a laugh, I said, that's just the kind of stuff I do. But she opened up layer after layer. Within 12 minutes, she really was so emotional, tears, and an unlock and an actual solution was able to be provided. And I walked away. That's the real point of the story. as I walked away, of course my life is better for that interaction. But I remember the sensation was, you can't think life isn't great with that moment. You just, that is great. That is rich. You just can't not feel grateful that day. You're not intentionally grateful, just you. So I love it for that reason. And I don't know if you can have the kinds of interactions you're describing without starting to think in terms of systems. I don't know you'd need that word.
Correct.
But
no, because you need the empathy that comes with understanding the system that the other person is involved in. So what we're talking about here is avoiding false proxies. That false proxies are easy to measure and not helpful. How many people are following you online is a false proxy. When that number goes up again, it's not going to make your day better. So we have to relentlessly tear down the false proxies and say, yeah, but what am I here actually to do? And where are there systems presented to me, including my internal systems, where I can be of service? And that's generative and resilient. You're never going to run out of projects if that's your posture.
When you walk into a new situation, an individual, a team, an organization, a keynote, do you have a deliberate intent to see the system? Or is it, are you just, is that sort of, okay, so you deliberate intent, and then is that different? Is it different than the method you described before? I mean, talk to me about that. Forget any method, forget any words you've used before. You just, in this moment, what is that like? Like, take it, that minor moment, and make it slow motion to us, and what is it? What's your thought process?
So my friend Jillian calls me up. She's working at a very fancy investment bank, and they have 28 summer interns. They've been together for 4 weeks. They have 8 weeks left to go. As a favor to her, would I please come in and talk to them over lunch? So I need to begin with what's on their minds. What's the system around them? If I go in and do a marketing presentation, I may amuse myself, but it's not going to be helpful. And so I start to think about, what system are you part of that gets you a summer internship at 20 years old at a place like this? So clearly I can make assertions about who your parents are and what your life has been like. Okay, you're 4 weeks into it. What systems are you encountering there that are making you feel safe and that are setting up a rhythm that's going to end up making you unhappy? Because you've lived a life of privilege. This is sort of a pinnacle of that life of privilege. But soon it's going to confront a life of performance, and you're not ready for that. So then I say, what intervention can I make that will create tension that they are enrolled in, that they're willing to at least get started? Because once I can get them started, their personality is such they won't stop. So I got to make sure the first couple of minutes, I don't lose them.
Right.
And then I only got 8 minutes. In 8 minutes, can I leave them with something that they're going to be thinking about in 5 years? Because I got nothing to lose. I'm not getting paid. And I like my friend, so I want to help her. That is all went through my mind in those words.
When you got there, did you, in those first 2 minutes, did you tell them anything of that process, or did you just give them the output of the thinking?
So most people aren't ready to hear in 2 minutes that the whole world is the Matrix. And so they have to do it before they see it. That my goal is to have people do it. So I'm happy to share what we did as we start to wrap this up. What I did was, on my way in, I stopped at, again, the receptionist, and I grabbed 40 blue index cards. And I walk in and I hand out the index cards. And I say, hey, great to be here. Listen, on my way over, I got a call, and I named some famous rich person. He's got a project, and it's a 3-month project. It starts next week, and there's a bounty of $200,000 for each person who works on the project. And he wants one of you to run it. And you get to pick 3 people in this room to be on your team. Any 3 people you want. So take a pencil. You got the little index card. Write down the names of the 3 people in the room you're going to pick to be on this project that's going to change your entire career and make you plenty of money, because that's why you're here, right? And the discomfort in the room is profound. It's truly profound, because I've ripped the lid off affiliation, because all of them are equal, and they don't like this idea that they have to choose or be chosen. So I say, hold on. No one's going to look at your card. I promise. I don't want to know what names you write down. So finally, begrudgingly, they write down the names. And then I say, all right, I got 2 questions for you. Question number 1, how many of you think a few people in this room had their name written down a lot? And everyone says, yeah, that's probably true. And then I said, second question, how many of you think your name was written down a lot? More discomfort, because you're not supposed to claim that status with your peers.
Right.
And I said, that's all I came to talk about. I said, you've been here for 4 weeks. You all showed up as strangers. You could have adopted any posture you wanted. And some people here adopted a posture that got them written down a lot, and some people didn't. So there's 8 weeks left, right? You're all children of privilege. You all have this playground where you can do a thing. Over the next 8 weeks, what would you do differently to be the person who got their name written down by everyone? And I just sat in the silence for like a full 60 seconds. And then we had a spirited conversation about what it meant, because they felt the system for possibly the first time as independent nodes in a system that had them play a certain set of games. And I hope that this is, 10 or 15 years ago, that they left there with a strategy. And the strategy could be, I don't want to play this game anymore. Or the strategy could be, there's a game here, I'm going to play this game. But those are the only 2 choices.
Man, I really love that. My favorite opening line if I'm doing a keynote is this. It's I've been thinking about you, and I don't know if it's good to say it explicitly or not, but that's been true. I'm trying to think about their world, their system, what their reality is, and what you already said, it just names it so well. But it's like if you don't get that right, the rest of the presentation can be exactly the same, but the organ rejection rate is going to be high or higher.
Yeah.
If you get it right, the organ rejection goes effectively to 0, which is pretty amazing, because somebody says, oh, that's my kind of thing. That's relevant to me. That's my world. That's where I am. And if they don't feel that at the beginning, nothing else matters. And if they do feel like that, you're entering into their system and their reality. And so you're no longer an outsider in the same sense. You're an outsider that's relevant to them. Well, listen, Seth, I thank you. You've been generous with your time. I know that you've got a lot of appointments in now. You're on the tour now with This Is Strategy. I love that we've been able to, I won't even call deep dive, because there's so many more layers to this conversation, but to be able to connect to the idea of systems in the way that we have, of course, absolutely necessary to build strategy to help people make better plans. Seth Godin, thanks for being on the podcast.
Thank you, Greg. Go make a ruckus. I appreciate your time, sir.
Thank you.